That's Nick.
And that's Joseph. And today we're here to talk about Both Sides of the Blade, the 14th film directed by Claire Denis, which premiered at the 2022 Berlin International Film Festival, where she received the Best Director prize. It is being released theatrically, courtesy of IFC Films, July 8th, 2022. And what a treat this year is. This is the first of two Claire Denis films, the other which was Stars at Noon, premiering out of Cannes.
What do I know from Claire?
I know I made you watch my favorite film of hers, which is Trouble Every Day.
What's that about?
Where Beatrice Dahl has that disease that basically makes her a vampire, and Vincent Gallo is her boyfriend or husband, and they're trying to find a cure, and Alex Descas is the man that they go to. This probably would have been a decade ago at this point.
I don't remember that, but it sounds interesting.
I think that was one of the first films that I showed you that you're like, oh, you like really dark things.
Wow.
God. I've loved her since her first film, which was Chocolat back in 1988, not to be confused with the Chocolat that stars Juliette Binoche, directed by Lasse Hallström. But another big one is Beau Travail. White Material, starring Isabelle Huppert, is a favorite. I Can't Sleep, I highly recommend. 35 Shots of Rum from 2008. I could just name her whole filmography.
No need.
Anyway.
All right. The basic story is very simple. It's set in modern time, like during COVID. It's about a woman named Sara.
Played by Juliette Binoche.
Sara is in a long-term relationship with a man named John.
Jean, played by Vincent Lindon.
Who I know from...
Titan.
That's right.
But in many, many other things, yeah.
Sara and John are in a relationship. One day, Sara goes to work and she sees a man and she is triggered. That man's named François.
Played by Grégoire, Colin.
And François happens to be her ex. So some backstory on these three. When Sara and John met, they were both in relationships. So John had a lady and Sara was with François. So then Sara and John get together. 9 years later, it's clear she hasn't really kept in contact with François. So she sees him and she's like... how would you describe her demeanor? Because she seems like...
Instantly intense.
Yeah.
But we already know that because we see her alone seeing François, and she's basically thrown into a spasm at work where she's moaning his name.
Okay. So John is like an ex-rugby player. He got in trouble for something and went to prison. So he's kind of like washed up, ex-felon, having a hard time with work. Sara has a well-paying job, so she kind of takes care of everything.
She's a radio personality, yeah.
François has started his own business and out of the blue asks John if he wants to work for him. John tells Sara and she is all about it. Like, you should do it. He does. And then she's just obsessed. Well, does François ask about me? Do you two talk about me? What does he think about me? What does he think about you with me? How does he... She's just all about him. It culminates with there's like a work event and John asks Sara to come, knowing that she's kind of like obsessed with François. Like, she won't stop talking about him. So he says, well, come on, girl, like, meet him. She does, and Sara and François have like an instant, like, the flame is burning bright. And she starts having an affair with him. John finds out, confronts the two of them. Kind of. He does talk to François, but we don't see that. We see him confront Sara. And he basically says, like, I'm not going to do this. So either you are going to be with me or with him. She acts like she can't decide. So John just leaves. The end. It's important to know, I like this movie. I think the acting is very strong. I think the writing of the relationship between these three people, particularly the way Sara is played out, works very well. I feel like I know that person. But I have a lot of questions. Like, I wish John was a little more developed. I wish they were all more developed because a big portion of the plot is John has this like teenage son who happens to be black.
Marcus.
And he doesn't care for him. Meaning, like, he's not raising him. This boy lives with the grandmother.
Played by Bulle, Ogier.
And the boy's having a hard time because he doesn't have proper parenting.
And he's having a hard time kind of
He feels disenfranchised.
Navigating his identity, yeah.
Right, as a black person and not really having anyone. There is a scene where he talks to his dad about that and the dad is not saying the right things. Mm-hmm. I didn't quite understand the purpose of that.
Okay, so I think that there are some in the periphery of the film there are some ideas that I don't know really quite fold into this relationship melodrama, but one of them is Sarah's this radio personality, right? And she's interviewing this woman from Lebanon and talking about this mass exodus because of strife going on there. She's talking to this man talking about Frantz Fanon, who wrote Wretched of the Earth, and talking about ideas of racism and how white people are these kind of unwitting victims in the idea of racism and colonialism. And I think that is kind of underlying where the direction of the Marcus tangent is.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of time spent talking about race, and I just feel like it serves no purpose. It doesn't take me anywhere. It doesn't quite connect.
I think it's supposed to be more of like these overall kind of issues, identity issues that the triangulated adults are having as well. And
it feels tangential.
It does feel tangential. It doesn't sit side by side easily. The original title of the film was Fire, and I actually like both sides of the blade better and how that works, at least with the Binoche, Lindon, Grégoire, Colin triangle, because they're all kind of doing the same thing to each other, and the dull versus sharp side of the knife, because he's kind of left his son, Jean has left his Marcus to kind of fend for himself with his old white grandma that really can't do anything for him anymore. He's stealing from her, etc., and doesn't really know how to relate to him beyond kind of paroxysm, right?
You know what would have worked better for me is if we sort of approached the story from John's point of view and saw the juxtaposition of how he's treating his son compared to what's going on with his common law wife.
Sure.
Like, I don't even think we needed to meet Francois. Francois is just an idea. Like, I think the fact that the story is really focused on her, which that character does work well, it just makes all the other shit seem... I would have rather understand more about her character, because she just seems kind of one-dimensional. Like, we all know that person who's kind of self-absorbed and has a lot of passion about things, and they confuse passion with right and wrong.
Well, she's very like the grass is always greener, because the one story we get about her relationship with Francois before he shows up is she's in bed with Jean saying, "Do you remember the first time I met you?" And all I could think, she was upset at Francois, and she was lusting for Jean. Like, why don't I have the one that stays? And now that she has the one that stays, she's kind of unhappy with him, and she's bored with him after 9 years together.
Sure. Quickly getting back to the dynamic between he and his son, they do have a conversation because the dad, and it's all very well written, because the dad shows up like this absentee father and thinks he's going to do like 16 years of parenting in an afternoon. And he's telling him like, you need to be yourself. You need to like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and blah, blah, blah. And the son says, well, I don't know. I feel like blacks and Muslims are Arabs, I'm sorry. Blacks and Arabs are like, like he's basically describing what it means to be disenfranchised, and he doesn't know what to do. And the dad's response is not what he needs, because the dad is saying like, well, that's just a state of mind. Like, well, no, it's not. So I thought that was very interesting, and then it just kind of stops.
Yeah.
So good points are brought up, and it's well done. It just stops.
And then you have Matty Diop playing this friendly pharmacist. This gossipy ass pharmacist.
That's right. There's a black woman who's a pharmacist, and she connects with the boy. But again, that would have been so interesting to explore. And then it's just like, well, what? Because the end of the film is John leaves his keys at Sarah's house, saying he's going to go back to his small town where his son is with the grandma. So it's like, okay, so you're going to go be a dad, or how's that going to look?
Well, and then Juliette Binoche it starts with her submerged in water. They're on vacation together, and then there's a final, like a bathtub scene where she drops her cell phone in the water, and she has to go get a new one, and she's told her SIM card is wiped clean and there's no backup. So we're left with this ambiguous ending, like she could walk away from both of them as well. What I do find interesting about Sarah is both men tell her that she's hurting them. And it's because she's withholding emotionally from Jean, and then when she physically withholds from Francois, he says the same thing to her, which I thought was also kind of
Well,
they're manipulating her too.
Yeah,
to a degree.
But it's also interesting, which you had said to me yesterday, like this female director making this story about a woman who's kind of doing, like she's
the problem. She's
the problem.
She's gaslighting Jean, and Binoche is so good. And obviously, I don't love her and everything. I know we both kind of thought she was a little over the top in The Staircase recently, but I do.
Oh no, what's the one? Oh no, who's the lady in the one with Kevin Bacon? Where she's super rich, she's a billionaire, and her son is a pedophile, and she's trying to. It's like.
You'll have to give me more clues because we just watched something like. Anyway, what I was trying to say though. Is that she's so good with her level of emotionality is I found myself automatically kind of gravitating towards her and then being like, oh no, she's lying. She's the bad one. But it's funny how your sympathies I think mine at least are conditioned to stray towards her and then have to check that and be like, well, she's actually the problem. Well, she's the asshole.
The scene when towards the end where John confronts her and she's playing, she's acting. Like, she's doing some strong acting as the character. Yeah. Like,
backtracking.
Trying to say that, like, she had a weak moment. And, like, you have to understand that once you love someone, you always love them. And I was feeling weak, but I know that. And it's like, girl, that's not what you're telling this man. And John even says, I talked to François. And he told me that you say you're in love with him. You want to be with him. So all this is just a performance. You're lying. And I think it's such a good job. The writing and the actor do such a good job because I really was looking at her like, I know this person. Mm-hmm. I've heard this before. We know people like this. We've experienced things like this. So
and the fact that she won't respond to him in the bathtub in the end. She won't make a decision. She won't be responsible for the misery. So it allows her to be this perpetual victim.
She's a victim who's always advocating herself, which is really just someone who just wants to do what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And she says at one point, like, I feel like I'm in prison. Or no, I feel like a slave. And I want to be free. Something to that effect.
She said she's never been free.
She's never been free. That's what she says. And it's like, well, you're basically throwing a tantrum. Because you can't do what you want to do. Mm-hmm. Oh, I was very, like, invigorated by that. Well, that's not the best word. It induced a reaction.
Sure.
And I think while this movie feels very basic, I think it's worth a watch because with people to have the conversation afterwards, because all three of them are on some bullshit. These are whole ass adults. They're all in their 50s.
They're all playing games and they all throw a tantrum.
And they're all acting like they're in high school.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So.
And John is somebody, I feel bad for him because he's clearly backed in a corner. She's the breadwinner. He's trying to start his own business. There's some kind of like bullshit with the French bureaucracy going on in the background as well as him trying to crawl out of this hole, right? And he it's clear that he doesn't want to directly face these issues, but he doesn't have like a leg to stand on perhaps either.
But, again, the fact that sort of the roles are reversed and it's these men trying to secure this woman. So it's interesting, like, if the tables were turned and it was a woman in John's position, like, feeling like, I know this is some bullshit, but I can't leave because I'm kind of, like, financially, indebted to this person. And so it's very interesting.
It was written by Christine Angot, who wrote Claire Denis' film Let the Sunshine In, which was her first film with Binoche in 2017. And this feels kind of like the nightmare version of that film, because Let the Sunshine In is headlines Binoche as this woman that's looking for love in Paris, and it's kind of an anti-rom-com, but very much the opposite of the kind of woman she's playing here, which I find interesting. And notably, it's a COVID film because this is what Denis made while she was waiting during all the perpetual delays to do Stars at Noon.
What else you got?
It was shot by Eric Gauthier, and I like it. It also doesn't feel like a film that I think will be dismissed years from now as a COVID film, even though clearly, that's what's going on in the background. You were making fun of she always uses the same band for her soundtracks, Claire Denis, Tindersticks.
Oh, that I only had one note for this movie, and it was the score.
I think it's only towards the beginning where it has that kind of tinny.
It sounds like the score from The Room.
A hopeful. it has this playful vibe in the beginning, but if you notice, it gets increasingly darker, and it starts to almost sound like a psychological thriller as we're getting into it. And there are lots and lots of like extreme close-ups, which I kind of like because that kind of gets into the intensity, especially with Binoche.
Juliette has beautiful teeth, by the way.
She's a very beautiful.
She's a
woman.
beautiful woman, yes. But
even when she first initially approaches Vincent Lindon, and she's like, "You don't need to be worried." He's like, "Well, I'm not."
You should be.
It's frustrating. I feel like it's a little long. It's kind of languid in the lead up, but I think that last half hour is, as they say, gangbusters.
What would you give it?
3.5.
I would give it 3 out of 5. The movie I was thinking of stars Liam Neeson and the man from Memento.
Oh, Memory is the name.
Who's that French actress? The one whose son is...
she's not French. It's Monica Bellucci.
Oh, Monica Bellucci's not French?
She's Italian.
Oh, I thought that was Juliette Binoche.
As her last name, right? No.
Oh, well, I don't know. They're both beautiful ladies with dark hair. I don't know. Hit the thanks button. Listen to our podcast. Bye.